Welcome back, everybody. Today's deep dive is going to be pretty fascinating. We're going to be looking at the work of John Rasmussen,
Oh, yeah.
who is a shaman and a healer and a teacher.
That's right.
And he's got some really interesting ideas about how we can address conflict in the world. So we've got his writings right here, and we're excited to unpack them together and see what we can glean.
See what insights we can get from his unique perspective. It's interesting because he doesn't just look at the surface level problems, like, just point fingers at the wars or the political divides. He really goes deep into what he believes are the root causes, these conflicts, things like religious, secular, and ideological extremism, all stemming from things like confusion, misperception, and fear. It's like he's painting a picture of a world where these extreme viewpoints are fueled by a lack of understanding and a disconnect from our own inner selves.
So it's not enough to just address the symptoms of the conflict, like you said, the wars or the political divides. He's saying we need to go deeper and understand the underlying issues.
Exactly.
Okay.
And to tackle these root causes, he proposes a four-pronged approach: education, unconditional loving kindness, deep healing, and courage.
Wow.
Each one of these is interconnected, building upon the others to try to create a path towards a more peaceful world.
That's quite a roadmap he's laid out for us.
It is.
So let's take a closer look at each of these solutions, starting with education.
Okay.
What kind of education is he advocating for?
Yeah, so he's not talking about just memorizing facts and figures and, just textbook learning. It's much deeper than that. He's calling for a deeper kind of education that emphasizes critical thinking, research from reliable sources, and discernment. It's about really seeking truth and understanding in a world where, we're bombarded with information overload, and it can lead to confusion and manipulation. But he doesn't stop there. He also stresses the importance of direct experience and data, which aligns with his shamanic background.
That makes a lot of sense. You can't just read about empathy and conflict resolution in a textbook.
Exactly.
And expect to become a peacemaker. It takes real-world experience.
Exactly.
Self-reflection and a willingness to challenge your own biases.
I love that you brought that up because that brings us to his next solution. Unconditional loving kindness. Now, I know that might sound a bit idealistic, but Rasmussen sees it as much more than just a feel-good sentiment. He views it as an active force for change, a way of being in the world that can actually shift the dynamics of conflict.
So it's not about being nice.
It's not just about being nice.
But it's about cultivating a deeper sense of compassion and understanding, even for those we might disagree with.
Exactly. And this ties in directly with his third solution, deep healing. Rasmussen argues that addressing past wounds and traumas, both on a personal and a collective level, is crucial to breaking these cycles of violence that we see and fostering genuine understanding. He believes that unhealed trauma often manifests as fear, anger, and resentment, which can then fuel conflict and division.
It's powerful.
It is very powerful.
He's saying if we want to heal the world, we need to start by healing ourselves.
Yes.
But what does he mean by deep healing? Does he give any specifics about what this process might look like?
He does. He emphasizes the importance of confronting our own shadows, acknowledging the ways we've been hurt or have hurt others, and working to release the pain and resentment that we carry. This could involve things like therapy, journaling, spiritual practices, or even just having honest conversations with those we've been in conflict with. The key is to try to create space for healing and forgiveness, both within ourselves and in our relationships with others.
So deep healing is an active process of self-discovery and transformation.
It is.
Not just a passive hope that things will get better on their own.
Exactly. And this leads us to his fourth and final solution, courage.
Courage. Why is that so essential in addressing conflict?
That's a great question. Rasmussen argues that courage is needed to embrace what he calls functional diversity.
Functional diversity.
Yes. It's the willingness to acknowledge and respect differences, to see the value in perspectives that challenge our own, and to stand up for what's right even when it's difficult. It takes courage to break free from groupthink, to question authority, and to speak truth to power, especially when it comes to issues that are so deeply ingrained in our society.
So courage is not just about physical bravery, but about the mental and emotional fortitude to stand up for what we believe in, even when it's unpopular or uncomfortable.
Exactly. It's about stepping outside of our comfort zones, challenging the status quo, and being willing to engage in difficult conversations with empathy and understanding. And that's really where his concept of functional diversity comes into play.
Okay.
He believes that our differences, when approached with respect and a willingness to learn from one another, can actually become a source of strength and resilience, allowing us to solve problems in more creative and innovative ways.
So instead of fearing or suppressing differences, he's arguing that we should embrace them.
We should embrace them.
As opportunities for growth.
Yes.
And understanding. That's a pretty radical shift in perspective.
It is a radical shift, but how does he see these ideas playing out in the real world?
Right.
I mean, the challenges we face today are so complex.
Yeah.
Can personal healing and courage really make a dent in these global conflicts?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
And I think that's a question that we'll explore further as we dive deeper into Rasmussen's work.
Okay.
He doesn't shy away from addressing the big issues, including the role of religion in perpetuating conflict.
All right, let's talk about religion.
Okay.
This is a topic that often sparks a lot of heated debate.
It does.
So how does Rasmussen approach this sensitive subject?
Yeah. Well, he specifically calls out the three major religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam.
Okay.
And he argues that they have been mistranslated, misinterpreted, misunderstood, and misapplied both intentionally and unintentionally. He doesn't condemn religion outright, but he's very critical of how extremist factions within these religions have twisted the teachings to justify violence and division.
So he's acknowledging the power of religion.
He is.
To inspire both good and bad actions depending on how it's interpreted and practiced.
Yes, and he sees proper interpretation of these religious teachings as a very crucial step towards peaceful coexistence.
Okay.
He argues that when we can move beyond literal interpretations and really delve into the deeper spiritual messages of these traditions, we can find common ground and a shared commitment to peace and compassion.
So it sounds like he's advocating for a more nuanced and inclusive understanding of religion.
Yes.
One that focuses on the shared values of love, compassion, and justice.
Exactly. But he also acknowledges that religion isn't the only driver of conflict.
Right.
He recognizes the significant role of greed,
Okay.
particularly in the context of the military-industrial complex,
Yeah.
which he sees as a prime example of how the pursuit of profit can fuel violence and perpetuate war.
So it's not just about religious extremism.
It's not just about that, no.
It's also about the systems and structures that prioritize profit over people.
Yes.
Which often leads to exploitation and conflict.
And this is where Rasmussen's framework comes full circle.
Okay.
Because he argues that greed at its core is a manifestation of fear and ignorance. It stems from a scarcity mindset, a belief that there's not enough to go around, so we have to hoard resources and power to ensure our own survival. And this fear-based thinking can lead individuals, corporations, and even nations to act in ways that are ultimately self-destructive and harmful to others.
It's fascinating how he connects greed back to those deeper issues of fear and ignorance.
It is.
Which are the very things he's trying to address through his solutions of education, healing, and courage.
Exactly.
It's like he's saying that if we can transform our inner world, we can transform our outer world as well.
Yes. And this is where things get really interesting. He challenges this belief that we're inevitably headed for some kind of apocalyptic destruction.
Right.
Which is very prevalent in some religious and ideological groups. These end-of-times prophecies, he sees those as detrimental because they can create a sense of hopelessness and resignation, hindering our efforts toward positive change and even fueling more conflict.
Well, yeah, if people believe the world is ending anyway, why bother trying to make things better?
Exactly. But Rasmussen offers a contrasting view. He believes that a paradise on earth can be achieved through active work toward healing, education, and courage.
Okay.
It's not about passively waiting for some divine intervention or a catastrophic reset.
Yeah.
It's about taking responsibility for our actions and working together to create a more just and peaceful world.
It's a bold statement.
It is bold.
But it's also incredibly hopeful. Like he's saying we have the power to change things.
We do.
If we're willing to put in the effort.
Exactly. And that's where his personal story comes in. Because he's not just a philosopher sitting in an ivory tower. He's a practitioner who is using his unique skills as a shaman, healer, and teacher to address these issues head on.
Wow.
He's worked with highly influential leaders in all fields, including education, health, business, environment, entertainment,
Wow.
and even politics.
So he's not just talking the talk, he's walking the walk.
He is.
Using his influence to try and make a real-world impact.
Yes, he is.
That's pretty inspiring.
It is, and it raises a lot of questions. Like what?
Like, how does he approach these powerful individuals?
Right.
What kind of conversations is he having with them? And most importantly, what kind of results is he seeing?
Those are questions worth exploring. So how about we take a moment to unpack this a bit further? What are some specific examples of how Rasmussen's shamanic approach is being applied to these complex challenges? So it's fascinating to think about a shaman working with these world leaders. It's not exactly the image that comes to mind when you think about international diplomacy. How does he describe his approach to working with these influential figures?
Well, he emphasizes that shamans are trained to focus on solutions. They don't just dwell on problems.
Right.
It's about directing energy toward what works toward creating positive change.
So instead of getting caught up in the blame game or all the negativity that often surrounds these global issues,
Exactly. Yeah.
he's encouraging a more proactive and empowered approach.
Yes, and it's not about ignoring the problems, but it's about tackling them with a solutions-oriented mindset.
Okay. He uses this metaphor of barking up the right tree,
I like that.
making sure that our actions are aligned with the changes we want to see in the world.
That's such a great analogy because it's so easy to get caught up in like the outrage cycle and ranting about all the things that are wrong.
It is.
But are we actually doing anything productive?
Are we barking up the right tree?
We're barking up the right tree.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a question we should all be asking ourselves, I think. And it really brings us back to Rasmussen's core message that it all starts with personal healing and understanding.
So if we want to create a more peaceful world, we need to start by cultivating peace within ourselves.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it.
Okay.
He believes that our individual healing journeys can have ripple effects on the world around us. You know, like that famous Gandhi quote, "Be the change that you wish to see in the world."
Right.
It's very much aligned with that.
I see. So Rasmussen is really calling for a paradigm shift.
Yes.
Instead of relying on external solutions to fix our problems,
Yeah.
he's saying we need to look inward, do the work of healing and self-discovery, and then use that newfound wisdom to create positive change in the world.
It's a very powerful idea, and it challenges a lot of our conventional thinking
Right.
about how we address these complex issues.
It's not like a quick fix
No.
or a simple solution.
Yeah.
He's really presenting a whole new way
He is.
of approaching the world and our place in it.
Yeah, he's asking us to really examine our own beliefs and our own assumptions about how the world works.
Well, this deep dive is really pushing us to think beyond the usual headlines and sound bites.
It is.
And to grapple with some really deep, fundamental questions
Yes.
about human nature and conflict and the potential for healing and transformation.
It is. We've talked a lot about the problems and the potential solutions.
Yeah.
But how do we actually put this into practice?
Right. How do we translate these ideas into action?
Right.
How do we actually implement this four-pronged approach?
Yeah, well, that's where things get really interesting because he believes that each one of these solutions is interconnected.
Okay.
For example, education is not just about acquiring knowledge, it's about cultivating critical thinking skills, which can then help us discern truth from falsehood and challenge our own biases. And this then allows us to approach unconditional loving kindness and deep healing with more clarity and intention.
So it's not just a checklist of things to do,
It's not just a checklist.
but a more holistic
It's a framework.
for personal and collective transformation.
Exactly. And he uses the example of addressing greed.
Okay.
Remember how we talked about how he sees greed as a manifestation of fear and ignorance?
Wow.
So through education, we can start to understand the systemic factors that contribute to things like greed and inequality.
Yeah.
Through deep healing, we can confront our own personal attachments to wealth and material possessions.
Wow.
And through courage, we can then challenge the systems and structures that perpetuate greed and exploitation.
So it's like a multi-layered approach tackling the issue
It is.
from all these different angles.
Yes, I think that's a great way to put it.
But it all sounds very abstract.
Yeah.
Can you give us any concrete examples of how this might actually play out in the real world?
Certainly. Let's imagine for a moment a conflict between two communities over limited resources like water.
Okay.
A traditional approach might involve negotiations, treaties, or even military intervention. But from Rasmussen's perspective, The first step would be to facilitate dialogue and understanding between the two communities.
Okay.
Create a safe space for people to share their fears, their needs, and their perspectives.
So building bridges of communication and empathy before jumping to solutions.
Exactly. And within that dialogue, you start to weave in elements of education, helping people to understand the historical context of the conflict, the ecological realities of water scarcity, and the potential for collaborative solutions.
So shifting the narrative from one of competition and scarcity to one of
Yes.
cooperation and shared responsibility.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where deep healing comes in, because by addressing past traumas and grievances, individuals within those communities can start to release the anger and resentment that often fuels these conflicts. This might involve truth and reconciliation processes or community healing ceremonies, or even just individual therapy to help people process their pain and find forgiveness.
So creating space for emotional healing alongside those practical solutions.
Absolutely. And finally, it takes courage for individuals within those communities to stand up and advocate for peace and cooperation, even when they face opposition or fear of reprisal from their own group. It takes courage to challenge that status quo, to embrace compromise, and to build a future based on shared values rather than fear and division.
This example really brings Rasmussen's framework to life.
It does.
It shows how these seemingly abstract concepts can actually be applied to real-world conflicts in a way that is both practical and transformative.
I agree.
But it also highlights the challenges.
Yes.
Because these kinds of solutions require a level of commitment, patience, and open-mindedness.
They do.
That can be really hard to find.
It can be.
Especially in the midst of a conflict.
Especially in a heated conflict. It's not easy.
Right.
But Rasmussen believes that change is possible.
Okay.
And that it starts with each of us. And he often talks about the importance of planting seeds.
Planting seeds. What does he mean by that?
He believes that every act of kindness, every moment of understanding, every courageous stand we take for what's right is like planting a seed of peace in the world.
Okay.
We may not see the fruits of our labor right away, but those seeds can take root and grow in unexpected ways. So it's encouraging us to focus on the long game, to trust in the power of small actions to create those ripple effects that can lead to lasting change.
It's a beautiful and inspiring image.
It is.
And it makes me wonder, how can we as individuals cultivate that kind of hope and resilience? Especially when we're bombarded with so much negativity and despair in the news every day. How do we avoid feeling overwhelmed and helpless in the face of such complex challenges?
That's a question worth pondering, and it's one that Rasmussen addresses directly in his work.
Okay.
He offers some very practical tools and techniques for maintaining a sense of balance and well-being, even in the midst of chaos and uncertainty. And he also talks about the importance of finding our own unique role in the larger movement for peace and justice.
Okay, I'm eager to learn more about those practical tools and techniques. How about we dive into that now and explore how we can apply Rasmussen's insights to our own lives, both personally and in our efforts to create a more peaceful world. So we're back, and we want to look at how we can practically apply some of Rasmussen's insights into our own lives. He talks about planting seeds, but how do we cultivate that hope when we're just bombarded with so much negativity in the world?
Right. Rasmussen acknowledges that it can be really tough to stay positive when you're constantly being exposed to all the negativity out there. And he suggests that we really need to be mindful of the information that we're consuming.
Okay.
So instead of just endlessly scrolling through those news feeds that just fuel anxiety, maybe dedicate some time to engaging with content that inspires and uplifts us. It's like choosing to nourish our minds with healthy food instead of junk food.
So it's about being selective with our information diet.
Exactly.
And making conscious choices about what we're letting into our mental space.
I love that. Information diet. That's a good one. He also talks about the importance of connecting with nature.
Okay.
He believes that spending time in nature can really help us to reconnect with that sense of peace and grounding, reminding us of the interconnectedness of all things.
Yeah, that resonates with me. There's definitely something about being out in nature that helps to put things in perspective. It reminds you that there's this bigger picture beyond all of our everyday worries and anxieties.
Absolutely. And he also talks about the importance of things like mindfulness and meditation practices, which can help us to cultivate a sense of inner peace and resilience, allowing us to respond to challenges with more clarity and compassion rather than just reacting impulsively out of fear or anger.
So it's about developing those inner resources that allow us to stay centered and grounded.
Yes.
Even when things are really chaotic externally.
Exactly. And it's not about becoming passive or ignoring the problems in the world. It's about strengthening our own inner foundation.
Okay.
So that we can engage with those problems in a more effective way.
So Rasmussen believes that our personal transformation
Yes.
is actually an essential part of creating a more peaceful world.
A very essential part.
And as we heal ourselves, we
Yes.
become kind of these beacons of peace.
We do.
Radiating that energy outwards to our relationships and our communities.
I love that image. It's like that ripple effect we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Our individual actions, no matter how small they might seem, can create these ripples of positive change that extend far beyond ourselves.
Yeah. It's a powerful reminder that we all have a role to play
We do.
in creating a more just and peaceful world.
We can't just sit back and wait for someone else to fix things.
Right. Yeah.
You know, it's really about each of us stepping up and doing what we can,
Yeah.
no matter how small it might seem.
You've really captured, I think, the essence of Rasmussen's message.
I think so, too.
It's been, I think, a really inspiring and thought-provoking deep dive into his ideas.
It has.
And as we kind of go back out into the world, I hope that we can all carry with us a sense of hope and empowerment, and remember that we each have the power to plant those seeds of peace and contribute to a more beautiful future.
It's been a pleasure joining you on this deep dive and exploring these really important ideas with you.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll see you next time.